I'm a believer that this team's going to win the national championship, the season of dreams.
So JUCK over with Menace to Sports.
And if we allow them to devalue it, we lose a lot of what makes college football special. Don't let them do it. Don't let them devalue what it means to you. The Ohio State Buckeyes, the 2024 national champs, will be remembered for how they came out of that. And welcome into JUCK on Bucks. Appreciate you so much for joining me. Offensive line coach Justin Fry takes the job with the Arizona Cardinals and reunites with Paris Johnson. Good for him. He deserves it, and I think he'll definitely enjoy it more than he enjoyed the college ranks. He'll actually get an off season, not have to deal with recruiting. Chip Kelly, Ryan Day's mentor, one and done with Ohio State as he takes the job with the Las Vegas Raiders as their offensive coordinator. Those two departures off the heels of losing defensive coordinator Jim Knowles to Penn State. Additionally, defensive line coach Larry Johnson had a meeting with Ryan Day over the weekend. We don't know the results of that conversation yet, but we do know that his very popular graduate assistant, who had been working with him for a couple years, was very good at recruiting from Louisiana with some Southern ties, has been hired away. He goes to Texas to become their outside linebackers coach. When you win a national championship, all bets are off, buddy. And when the NFL comes calling, most of these college coaches are going to jump. They're going to jump at the opportunity to work less hours for more money. It's just a flat out better lifestyle. It actually has an off season. That doesn't exist in college football. You don't have to recruit. You don't have to waste a year and a half or 2 years of your time for a program to come in and offer your guy double the money at the last minute. And then you go back to your people and you can't get it. And then boom, it's gone. All your time wasted. And then you got every Tom, Dick, and Harry saying you suck at your job. You can't recruit when you really won. These things happen. They definitely happen. Those guys don't got to deal with that anymore. Well, Chip and Fry don't have to deal with that anymore. We know that Jim Knowles never had to deal with that anyway because he had it made. He didn't have to recruit at Ohio State. I'm sure he won at Penn State. But Chip Kelly was making $2 million a year at Ohio State. He'll make $6 million for the Raiders. Wow. Anytime you can triple your salary, I mean, good on you, buddy. Good on you. Was Ryan Day surprised by Chip Kelly leaving? My thought was he knew his buddy wanted to go back to the NFL, and he probably told him if there was a conversation about it, I know you want to go, buddy. Just go. Get that job. Get back up there. That's where you want to be. And that was my thought when we did that live show on Sunday. And then Sunday night, Joel Klatt posted something from his show. He was actually recording his podcast with Ryan Day as the Chip Kelly news broke. Here's what they had to say.
Just kind of breaking as we're recording this. About Chip. So yeah. What did it mean for you, to have him with you to reach the mountaintop? Because you guys go way back, and everyone has talked about it. We talked about it for a long time. He was your coach. You guys have known each other all the way back, to when you were a youngster. What did it mean to you to do this with him?
That was great. It was great. And, we talked about it, the fact that, we had a really good group here, and, the dream would be to win a national championship. And then, he decides whether he wants to stay or have an opportunity to go to the NFL. And it's exactly what happened. And, just to be able to, have a beer in a few years, and talk about the year that we had together is going to be special because we all started together. And this is why I started with him. And we went and did that. And what a great story. And I know so many people back home in New Hampshire are just excited for him and for the story. It's pretty special.
And it is pretty special. So it seems pretty clear that this was all very transparent between Ryan Day and Chip Kelly. And that right there looks like a happy guy. That's not a stressed guy. Ryan Day can't hide his stress. We see Ryan Day when he's stressed. That's a happy dude right there. So Ryan Day now in the situation currently where he needs to replace his offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, and offensive line coach. I want to address a few things first here as we get started. Number one, this is not the sign of a program who is falling apart. This is the sign of the healthiest you can be. The healthiest you can be when your coaches are getting poached by the NFL. It doesn't get better than that. So that's number one. Number two, as I saw a couple of the comments here, and I'll pull up, I believe it was Pam says, man, who else is going to leave? Our players are on Twitter heartbroken. How many players are going to leave now? There are zero players on this roster who are leaving because of Chip Kelly or Jim Knowles. Zero, not one. Justin Fry, I don't believe there are any players who are going to leave because of Justin Fry's departure. There are a couple coaches on this staff, James Laurinaitis, OG Walt, Brian Hartline, where I might be concerned about a few players leaving, and I'm not talking about them collectively. I'm talking about a few specific players in their room, but not one for those three guys. Players don't leave because of coordinators, unless there is a drastic schematic difference that comes in that makes their role in the offense much less. So Chip Kelly, Jim Knowles, they didn't recruit any of those guys. Their relationship with them is strictly, they're with their position coach, and then that's the boss, right? It's not like that. With their position coach, it's different. Now, Justin Fry, he has a really good relationship with a lot of those guys. Offensive linemen, number one, are less mobile than most players. They don't want to leave. And as long as Ryan Day brings in someone who's not a raging jerk and has a record of putting dudes in the NFL, we're all good on the player front. You're not going to see an exodus at all because of this. Now, losing your offensive defensive coordinator when they're really good can be a very big blow to the program if you don't make good hires. Chip Kelly and Jim Knowles, I think when we look back last year, were the best pairing of offensive and defensive coordinators in the country. I think Notre Dame was a close second with Al Golden and Mike Denbrock. And then after that, those two groups at Notre Dame and Ohio State, a pretty decent gap. So no doubt it's not ideal to lose both of these guys. And no matter who you hire in year one in 2025, your offensive and defensive coordinator pairing is not going to be as good as it was in 2024. If it is, that would just be, a 1 in a million thing. But let's not forget, in 2024, Jim Knowles and Chip Kelly were also working with the most talented group of grown men in the entire country. They had every advantage you could possibly have. Now, last week, we looked at the main contenders in 2025. There is nobody on the board there that looks like Ohio State in 2024. This is wide open. And when we look at Ohio State's roster, which we will in a few, it's as good as anybody else out there. There are some question marks, but it's as good as anybody out there. When it comes to position coaches, replacing Justin Fry on the offensive line, he did a really good job with the offensive line in year 3, and things were looking up. And with the talent that they just brought in, with Anyanwa, the left tackle from Rice, Phillip Daniels from Minnesota, an Ohio kid, but from the University of Minnesota, likely to win the right tackle guard or the right tackle position, but Ian Moore pushing the two of them. And then the combo in the middle of Austin Sarabel, Carson Hinsman, Luke Montgomery, Tegra Shabola, Josh Padilla coming up. Like you've got a core of dudes in the middle. This offensive line still looking up, absolutely looking up. There's only one position coach on this roster, on this staff, that is a huge blow, that is irreplaceable, and that's Brian Hartline. He's the best in the sport, hands down, at his position. He is a difference maker. And if you lose him, it's a guaranteed downgrade to your wide receiver room. We all know that. Now, what Ryan Day is faced with here is where Nick Saban made his hay, man. He was so good at finding the next dude to replace the dude that just left, and he just did it over and over and over. And it's going to be really interesting to see what Ryan Day is able to do here now that he has a program that just won a national championship, just lost a bunch of coaches. Is he able to bring in the next dude and keep it rolling? Because if he is, wow, we got something brewing here. But he's certainly given us confidence. He's given us a lot of confidence. We should feel pretty good with this in his hands, right? 6 hires. I was saying 5. I totally forgot. 6 hires or promotions. Like you had some that were internal promotions, GA up to full-time coach, or an external hire. 6 of them last year. He hired an offensive coordinator twice. He promoted Keenan Bailey up to tight ends coach. He hired Matt Guerreri from the outside the program to come in and coach safeties. He promoted James Laurinaitis to full-time linebackers coach. And then he did a national search and went and hired Carlos Lachlan out of Oregon. And he nailed every single one. He nailed every single one. His original OC hire, Bill O'Brien, went and got a head coaching position. That's a guy in demand. So really, you could say 6 for 6, right? I'm going to give him 6. 6 for 6. That's more than half the staff. And in year one, replacing half the staff, he went on a championship run. How impressive is that? So keep that in mind if you're stressed about the unknown right now, because I think that's more where the stress comes from, is we just don't know right now what it's going to be. You're going to feel a whole lot better when you know who it is. Ryan Day has been aces in his career when it comes to hiring people. He knows exactly what he wants now in year 7. Year 7. This is a spiced veteran. He's got every advantage. He is the head coach at one of the most respected places in the country that college coaches aspire to be at. Last year, the assistant coaches pool financially was number 1 in the country. Both of those coordinators were top 3 in the country as the offensive or defensive coordinator in compensation. Ryan Day's peers, they all want to work with him. He has a very good reputation as being someone you want to work with in the coaching circle. All except for the way things went down with Tony Alford. None of this has ended bad with him and anybody else. You come to Ohio State, and as you see, if things go well, you can get yourself boosted up to the NFL, get a head coaching position from it. You get the advantage of working with the best players in the country. You have every advantage, and you're fresh off a national championship. So this is going to be really, really interesting to see what he does here. Now, when you got all that going for you, you know what you don't need to do? You don't need to settle. You don't need to settle for anything. But it's in our nature to stick with what is comfortable. There was no option to stick with what's comfortable when Tony Alford left. There was no option. Ryan Day had to go out and do a national search, and he came back with Carlos Loughlin. And Carlos Loughlin, thus far, was a 10 out of 10 hire. 10 out of 10. But when we talk about the offensive coordinator, calling plays for Ryan Day's offense requires a whole nother level of trust. Trust that he clearly had in Chip, clearly had in Bill O'Brien. We saw a lot of Kevin Wilson for offensive coordinator when this news first broke that Chip was leaving. We had also seen him proposed by a lot of people as the offensive line coach when it broke that Fry was leaving. And Wilson, he could work. Certainly. They love him in the building. His son Toby was on the team just last year. Easy transition. Ryan would trust him calling plays. But are you settling if you hire Kevin Wilson? Or are you getting the very best of the best out there for you? And the best is different for everybody. The best for Ryan Day and his offense is going to be different than the best for James Franklin. So are you settling, or is this the best for Ryan Day if it's Kevin Wilson? It wouldn't be a hire I'd be mad about, but I certainly wouldn't be excited about it. A lot of Brian Hartline for offensive coordinator, and this one gets really interesting. A lot of people say, I don't want Hartline. He's never called plays. I don't want someone doing something for the first time at Ohio State. And generally, that's my attitude as well. You know, we got a head coach who is a first-time head coach doing it at Ohio State. That bothered me when he was hired. I didn't like it. I also didn't like Keenan Bailey being promoted as a first-time position coach with the tight ends this year. Both of those worked out really well. Now, we've seen times where it hasn't worked out, but both of those have worked out really well. All I know is Brian Hartline was the offensive coordinator, and Ryan Day said he was going to call plays in 2022. Now, for a reason or many reasons, that didn't happen. We don't know why that was specifically. It's probably several things, but I mean, we can guess that maybe Ryan wasn't quite ready to give it up. We know that that was difficult for him. Maybe Hartline wasn't quite ready to do it. Maybe he admitted that to himself and admitted that today. We don't really know what happened, but we do know that when Ryan Day did give it up, he went out and hired a veteran guy in Bill O'Brien, not a guy that he felt he would have to walk through it or a first-time guy. So what do we do here? As for Day, I don't think he goes back to calling plays himself. I think he's definitely going to hire an offensive coordinator. He's now got a taste of a year away from it, and his job just continually more and more onto his plate. I'm of the opinion that if Hartline wants it and Ryan Day trusts him, I'm all in, right? Even though I hate people doing things for the first time at Ohio State, Brian Hartline is a really smart dude. He's really confident. He's humble. Keep in mind, he gracefully stepped aside when Chip Kelly came in. There was no animosity there. That at least he didn't show it, and it certainly seemed genuine when they asked him about it. Learned for a year under Chip. Chip praised his offensive mind, and it seemed pretty genuine. I think Brian Hartline's a pretty special dude. And if Ryan Day trusts him that he can do it, let's do it, man. Let's do it. We don't know if he wants to do it, though. We don't know. We're just speculating here. We're speculating because he's been around so long, and it seems like the natural progression. But let's keep in mind, you don't need to do that to be a head coach. I think Brian Hartline, if Rich Rod wasn't, literal Rich Rod who revolutionized West Virginia football, if he wasn't on the market for West Virginia this past cycle, I think Brian Hartline is the head coach at West Virginia, straight from a wide receiver coach. It's two different skills, running an offense or a defense and being the boss of the program. I think Brian Hartline is going to be an excellent head coach if that's what he chooses to do, whether he goes the route of the stepping stone being a coordinator or whether he goes smaller program and works his way up, smaller program head coach, works his way up there. There's a couple avenues. He doesn't need to do this. Maybe he wants to, maybe he doesn't. We're going to find out pretty soon. Because if he does want to, and Ryan Day skips him over, well, this is the last year of his contract. I'd imagine he's gone. But he's a very valuable piece. I think you got to do what you need to do to keep him happy, but you certainly don't give it to him if you don't think he's ready. It's a sticky situation if he wants it and Ryan Day doesn't think he's ready for it. Certainly. But this is really interesting. And all I keep leaning back on is Ryan Day knows what the hell he's doing. He's proven that to us, right? He's proven it. As far as outside candidates, the first name that popped into my head was Ryan Grubb. Ryan Grubb was Kalen DeBoer's offensive coordinator for the Washington Huskies. And when Kalen DeBoer went down to Alabama, Grubb was supposed to be his offensive coordinator. And then he went to the Seahawks, where Chip Kelly was trying to get the job. Remember, Chip Kelly was trying to get that Seahawks job. Instead, Ryan Grubb gets it. And I thought, how funny would that be if Ryan Grubb now ended up getting the Ohio State job a year later, and then Chip goes to the NFL. But Kalen DeBoer hired him. So he spent a year with the Seahawks. He goes down, and now he's Kalen DeBoer's offensive coordinator, which I think makes Alabama a much better team immediately. So I think the best candidate in the country, the most obvious, surefire, home run candidate you could get is Will Stein out of Oregon. I think he's exceptional. I don't think Oregon would let him go. I think they would do whatever it took. Dan Lanning took a real chance on him, bringing him up from the University of Texas, San Antonio as a very young, bright coach and elevating him to a pretty big role as the Oregon offensive coordinator. You'd imagine there'd be some loyalty there. But Dan also took a real chance on Carlos Loughlin, and Ohio State was able to pull him out of there. Will Stein in 2023 made $835,000. In 2024, they raised him all the way up to $1.4 million. So a huge raise. Chip Kelly made $2 million last year. You could make him the highest paid. And when we look at these salaries here for offensive coordinators, Notre Dame's Mike Denbrock, $2.1 million. Utah's Andy Ludwig, $1.8. Garrett Riley at Clemson, $1.75. Charlie Weiss Jr. at Ole Miss, $1.65. Kirby Moore at Missouri. That's another interesting candidate, $1.5 million. Mike Bobo at Georgia, who the dog fans hate, $1.4 million. But you could offer to make Stein the number one paid coach in the country instead of just, the ninth, offensive coordinator. Maybe you can lure him away. Maybe you can. I just don't really see it happen. When I saw Charlie Weiss Jr., it immediately decided schematic advantage popped into my head. And I wonder if that's genetic, but he doesn't call plays for Lane Kiffin. Maybe that's someone to kick the tires on. You know, you imagine an offense coordinator wants to call plays, and as weird as it sounds, like that dude is. I hate Charlie Weiss, by the way, but people rave about Charlie Weiss Jr. I don't know. The head coach of my Akron Zips, Joe Moorhead, excellent at Penn State, beat us in the shoe when he was at Oregon under Mario Cristobal. I don't know if he wants to get back in as a coordinator, but his 3 years at Akron haven't gone great. I think that would be a pretty exciting hire. I think I'd be excited. Certainly trustworthy. You know, you're going to get a professional job out of it. A big name last cycle that surfaced was Jason Candle from Toledo, Mount Union dude, done a fantastic job at Toledo as the head coach. Really good offense. Does he want to step into the coordinator role, or does he want to continue to climb the mountain via the MAC head coach path, which we've seen several, Nick Saban for one, Matt Campbell for two, coaches be the head coach at Toledo and use that as a stepping stone to get a bigger job. And I think he's probably right where he needs to be if that's what he aspires to do. So we also found out that Ryan Day, he wasn't really in consideration last time, so I don't know why he would be this time. So that's what we're looking at for the offensive coordinator spot. As for the offensive line, you probably are going to want your offensive coordinator's input on this, which means now this offensive line hire maybe is pushed off a little bit. And if that's the case, it's kind of a bad spot, you know, being someone who's really into recruiting. I just keep thinking about the class of 2026. You've got some of them who want to make their decisions sooner than later. And the longer you wait, the less time that new guy has to build a relationship with those guys. So that's a big concern. It's a big concern. Ryan Day certainly took his time, which, you know, we want him to take his time. And with Carlos Loughlin, which was driving us all crazy. It seemed to take forever. We were well into spring practice. Well, I mean, Tony left during spring practice because he was unprofessional Bush League coach. But we were well into spring practice, and he took his time. We'll see. But I would imagine we're probably going to see the offensive coordinator hired first. But whatever direction they end up going, I got a ton of faith in Ryan Day when it comes to coaching hires. He's only had 2 stinkers since he's been at Ohio State. I said on the weekend show, 1 stinker in Kerry Combs. I forgot Parker Fleming. I don't know how. Parker Fleming was a disaster of a hire, even bigger disaster of an extension. I almost felt bad for that guy because it was so bad at times. Like anything that could go wrong did go wrong for Parker Fleming's special teams units. And then Ryan Day extended him and it got even worse. It was just terrible. So faith in Ryan Day as we move to the defensive side of the ball. Alan Clark, who was a GA for a few years here working under Larry Johnson. And there were a whole lot of people who thought that he was going to be the heir apparent, take over for Larry Johnson in his inevitable retirement because players liked him and he was from Louisiana and seemed to develop a really good relationship with recruits on the defensive line. That won't be happening. That GA is going to go cut his teeth first as an assistant coach at a smaller school, as he's now going to Texas to take their outside linebackers position and try to work his way up to a position at a school like Ohio State. Now, Larry, what's he doing? When word first broke that he was having this meeting with Ryan Day over the weekend, I saw a lot of people panicking. Not another one, man. You can't have another one right now. I actually think this is the perfect time. We know that Larry, if he comes back, this is the final year on his contract in 2025, and that'll be it. And we know that. Everybody knows that. This will be it. If he comes back one more year, this is his swan song. Now, you leave now. If Larry were to retire right now, you bring in a new defensive coordinator and a new defensive line coach together, just like offensive coordinator, offensive line coach, which sounds excellent to me. But if he doesn't retire, it really kills the recruiting class in 2027. Everybody knows it's his last year. Everybody. Nobody is going to get too far down the road with Ohio State from, the recruiting aspect. If he stops now, there are already several guys that have good relationships with not just Larry, but Ohio State, and they'll stay in the fold. So if he is to do it, I actually think this would be a great time. I don't think it would be another huge burden. I think in the long run, it would be better if he did it now rather than wait another year. That's my thought on it. I'm sure some of you will disagree. And Larry's unit certainly played great down the stretch there. No doubt about it. So you can't say he doesn't still got it. He's still got it. He can still coach. But I just think if he's going to leave, I'd rather just have it happen right now. As for the defensive coordinator role, news all week that Ohio State was cozying up to Pitt defensive coordinator Randy Bates. We had heard he was in town. Whether that's the only interview that's been had so far, I don't know. There's been, not many leaks about what they're doing, which is good. Good on them. But if Randy Bates was in town and interviewed with Ryan Day, that's great. He's doing his due diligence, checking all his boxes. As far as Randy Bates, I thought this was going to be an in-house hire. I thought this was going to be Matt G. It still may be, but if it's Randy Bates, this isn't settling for anything. And I talked about settling. I don't feel like Matt G is settling, because I feel like had Matt G stayed at Indiana as the defensive coordinator, for instance, and not come over here as the safeties coach, stayed at Indiana as the defensive coordinator, I think he would have been hired away this cycle to the next level. Like we just saw Minnesota's defensive coordinator get hired last week at Miami. I think the same thing would have happened to Matt Guerrieri. So in that scenario, I don't think this is settling. I think this is a climber. This is a riser. I believe Ryan Day really feels the way he said about him at the celebration, that he's a rising star, a brilliant mind. However he worded it, I'm paraphrasing here, but that was the gist of it. I think he really believes that. I think a lot of people really believe that. And I don't think it's settling to have him in that role, whether that's him and OG Walt, whatever you need to do to keep those dudes happy. After Heartline, losing Tim Walton would also be maybe the next most I would really hate to lose Walt. So whatever you need to do to make Walt happy, even though he is the assistant head coach right now in title, which I would think makes you pretty happy as well. But if Randy Bates is the guy and not Matt Guerrieri, I'm stoked. I love it. For one, he's a Buckeye from New Concord, Ohio, a graduate of Ohio State, coached at Muskingum, Miami, Ohio, Kent State, 64 years old. And when you listen to him, sounds a lot like Jim Knowles. His top three out of his top 5 recruits from the Cincinnati area, Dayton area, consistently the most difficult place to land Ohio State recruits in the state of Ohio. And he certainly has some ties down there. He's a guy who stays at places for a long time. He's not a big mover and a shaker. 12 years as the linebacker coach with Pat Fitzgerald at Northwestern, then over to Pitt in 2018 with Narduzzi. From 2019 to 2023, his defense, 230 sacks, highest total in the nation. This is an aggressive defense. This is a fun defense. You may remember the 5 interceptions this past year against Kyle McCord, 3 of them pick sixes. They score touchdowns. In fact, 12 touchdowns for them over the course of the last 3 years. That's second to Ohio State, who has 13. So this is a defense that is aggressive. They give up some yards, but they make some huge plays. And there's some people knocking some of the statistics. There's some that aren't great. There's some that are really great. The ACC's best rushing defense from 2019 to 2022, 3 years in a row as the best rushing defense. 2020, the American Football Coaches Association Assistant Coach of the Year. So if this is the hire, I love it. We're going to have a fun, exciting, aggressive defense. And he's a dude who's going to stick. He's not going to be bouncing around. And he's a Buckeye. So I think he checks all the boxes. If that's the dude, I'm happy about it. And again, I'm happy whoever Ryan Day hires, because I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. He's a national championship winning coach who just went 5 for 5, and or we'll call it 5.5 for 5.5, with Bill O'Brien getting hired away as a head coach. So this is going to work out great. Ryan Day's track record tells us so. There is no player exodus. It gets no bigger than Ryan Day in Ohio State, and he's going to pull some fantastic candidates, make some fantastic hires, and everything's going to be cool. Don't let the fear of the unknown get you down.